And a big, beautiful Friday thank you to the one and only Juan Williams.
Thank you. You're going to root for my basketball team, the Wizards? I hope you are.
I'll be definitely watching the basketball. I love playoff season. I prefer hockey over basketball this time of year.
But
Rangers are out, but I'm still in it.
This
If
is
it's
a
not
fun
college
time.
basketball, I don't care.
Oh, you
college
should
basketball
watch.
is the greatest.
I'm not
It is the
sporty,
greatest.
so.
Oh.
Well, we're gonna go do some laps and push-ups after this. Thanks so much to Juan, Rachel, and Katie. Of course, we'll be back on the couch Monday, noon Eastern.
We begin with a Fox News alert. A big day at the White House as we await a joint news conference between President Trump and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, both leaders who have not always seen eye to eye. Let's go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. President Trump is hosting a foreign leader at the White House for the second time this week. And while Chancellor Merkel's one-day visit may not have all the pomp and circumstance of the French leader's visit, it is still very important. What to do about Syria, Russia sanctions, growing worries about a trade war, and the fate of the Iran nuclear deal, all on the table for them to talk about. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, downplaying any concerns that relations between the two leaders are, shall we say, chilly.
I don't think it needs to be compared. France and Germany are great allies of the United States of America. Obviously, there are issues that affect all of us at the same time. And I've seen some of those comparisons. I think every leader is different, every relationship is different. But the important part is the relationship between the countries. And we're very happy that Chancellor Merkel is making another trip here.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us now from the North Lawn. John?
Harris, good afternoon to you. I was in the Oval Office for that pool spray a short time ago with President Trump and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and it appeared things were cordial. They shook hands this time, unlike the last time that they met in the Oval Office when there was sort of an awkward silence and distance between the two of them. Certainly, though, while things are cordial between the United States and Germany, it's not the bromance that the president was experiencing earlier this week when President Emmanuel Macron of France came to visit. A lot of issues on the table. You mentioned a couple of them. Let's drill down on a couple. Trade. The president has got a deadline of May 1st to decide whether or not he is going to extend waivers on tariffs on steel and aluminum to the European Union. The U.S. gets about 4% of its steel from Germany. So clearly that's a big issue for the Germans. They have waivers right now, but the president may not extend them. Angela Merkel will ask the president, please, to extend those waivers. The other big issue, and you mentioned it, the Iran nuclear deal. Germany is a signatory to the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, does not want the U.S. to exit. The president said that will clearly be a part of their discussions. Listen here.
I don't know. I think we'll be talking about Iran probably, but I don't necessarily expect it one way or the other. I know we're going to have a very good discussion on Iran, as I did with Emmanuel, was just left, the president of France. So we'll be having discussions on Iran. We'll be having discussions on trade. We'll be having various discussions.
In that meeting that you had with Emmanuel Macron, Macron proposed a third way here, saying don't pull out of the JCPOA. What we should do is we should leave that intact and then craft another deal that covers three more issues, and that is Iran's long-term nuclear goals, its ballistic missile program, and then its destabilizing behavior in the region. Harris, the president seemed to warm to that idea, so we'll see if that goes any further in his talks with Merkel. We've got a press conference coming up before the top of the hour. Scheduled to be. Who knows when it will actually happen. But we'll get a chance to ask the president some more questions about that.
So interesting to see you first look at your watch and then put it in air quotes. We'll see what happens. We'll cover it whenever it happens live. Thank you.
See you tonight, by the way.
All right. Looking forward to it. Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina sits on the Armed Services Committee. He is also co-author with Congressman Trey Gowdy of Unified, How Our Unlikely Friendship Gives Us Hope for a Divided Country. Great to see you today. Let's talk about the goals of this week. The president doing high-stakes diplomacy, first with France and now Germany. And you know, we didn't see him shake hands last time with Angela Merkel. We got two handshakes in that photo op earlier.
Well, two meetings, two handshakes, they all happened at one time. This is good news. It's been a good week for the country, and frankly, I'm optimistic about the press conference that will be held with the president and Germany.
Why are you optimistic? What are you watching for right now?
Well, a couple things. I thought the meeting earlier this week with France was a very positive and powerful meeting. The president wants, and we should all want, a stronger JCPOA or an agreement that works concurrently with the JCPOA. The fact of the matter is that it is a crazy concept that Iran will self-inspect or have time before inspectors can come in and see the lack of progress being made in the nuclear front. It's ridiculous that the ballistic missile testing continues, even though there's a UN Security Council a resolution that says it should not. And frankly, anyone who suggests that Iran in 2025 has nuclear weapons, that's a win in the JCPOA. That's a huge loss for the country. And if you believe in world peace, you cannot have Iran having nuclear weapons in 2025 or 2026 or any year thereafter.
So we just saw moments ago, in case people looked up at their screen, and they obviously saw the president there with Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. And our relationship with that country maybe has not been chilly. But when you talk about the leaders, observers have looked and said that the president had not previously shared the kind of warmth that he did with Emmanuel Macron of France, who just left. But clearly, we see for the first time the handshake with the two of them. We know that things have tightened with conversations about NATO and countries putting their percentages in. Where do you put this relationship right now?
I think it's on a path to prosperity. The truth is that in South Carolina, we have 130 German businesses making South Carolina a part of their home. Companies from BMW to Mercedes to T-Mobile, Robert Bosch. Our trading relationship with Germany is a very important one that is being strengthened, I believe, at this very moment between the relationship between Merkel and Trump. It's getting better as we speak. I have very high confidence that when they come out, that there will be a waiver that continues beyond May 1st for Europe, the EU, and I believe that ultimately we'll have a greater, stronger partnership with them. He's had an unorthodox trading relationship with the world, but it's produced better results for the American worker and the future of American jobs.
Real quickly, I want to talk about North Korea and how we go forward there. The diplomacy talks that are happening this week, that is something that's also on the table.
No question. For the first time, we saw Kim Jong-un cross the DMZ to the south. That is a very positive sign. The one thing that we have seen from 1992 and forward is that you cannot trust the North Koreans to live up to their word. We're going to have the concept of Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. I'm very low on the trust side with North Korea, very high on the verification side. So I want to know their definition of denuclearizing. I want to know their definition of progress, and I want to know the timeline that they're talking about.
Yeah, so maybe we don't have the same idea of what those words mean, denuclearizing?
Well, so far, according to all of our experience with North Korea, whatever they mean, it's not any definition found in the Webster's dictionary. That's part of the problem. So going forward, we better verify what it means.
Senator, sitting on the Senate Armed Services Committee, did you ever think in your lifetime, though, that you would see, and I'm going to talk about another handshake now, between the North and the South since 1953 is the first time that the North has gone to the South. Did you ever think that you would see that? And is that in itself an accomplishment that is enough at this point?
It is certainly not a step, but a leap in the right direction. I got to give President Trump a lot of credit for the progress we're seeing with North Korea. He has made some provocative comments about the size of each other's buttons, but the reality of it is it has led to having leaders at the table and having the South and the North 7 decades later having a real conversation about ending the Korean War by the end of this year, having the leader of North Korea cross over to the South, having a conversation about sitting down with the President of the United States of America. These are times that we've not seen in the past, but we should still be cautious in our optimism that the definitions that we use are used and defined the same way on both sides. But this has been a historic week. It's just not over yet.
Yeah. Senator Tim Scott, I love getting your perspective on things and checking in with Webster's every now and then, as you remind us to do. From the great state of South Carolina, so good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
For more on what we can expect from Angela Merkel's visit, let's bring in Niall Gardner, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Great to see you today. I want to talk with you about the diplomacy that's happening right now inside the White House and where you think the president should be going with Angela Merkel, particularly on the issue of Iran.
Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me on the show today. It's a very important meeting, certainly between Trump and Angela Merkel. Germany is a huge power within Europe. It's Europe's biggest economy, an important US ally. Having said that, of course, the relationship between Angela Merkel and Donald Trump has been significantly cool and frosty, very different to the relationship with Emmanuel Macron. I think Iran will be front and center in today's discussions and negotiations. The Germans, of course, want the United States to remain as part of the Iran nuclear agreement. President Trump is hugely skeptical, with very good reason, about what is a highly flawed deal. So far, however, the Germans haven't offered anything in terms of concrete measures to strengthen the Iran agreement, as the United States has requested. And so it remains to be seen whether she pulls out of the hat today any real concrete proposals for fixing the Iran nuclear deal, as Donald Trump puts it.
All right, so part of today's news, and I'm going to break in with this now, is that our brand new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is in the NATO conference in Brussels today. And so this word just coming out of there. Pompeo says no President Trump decision yet on Iran nuclear deal, but without substantial changes, the president is unlikely to stay in that Iran deal. You know, this then puts this in a different category now. He says no decision being made, but if they don't see change, he's not going to recertify.
Yeah, I think that's a very tough message coming from the new Secretary of State in Brussels at, meeting with NATO leaders there. And so I think it's a clear message from the White House that the Iran deal has to be strengthened. Otherwise, the United States is going to walk away on May the 12th. So far, I think European leaders have been extremely weak with regard to the threat posed by Iran, and we haven't seen real concrete proposals coming from European allies so far. Let's not forget, of course, that the Germans have a huge financial stake, of course, in the Iran nuclear agreement. Germany and Iran have about $5 billion worth of trade each year. That's significantly increasing. There's a big economic dimension to the Iran nuclear agreement.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is important, of course, for Germany and also France. They have a big economic stake in the long-term durability of the agreement.
Well, and Niall, we remember right after that deal was struck, you know, companies getting on big jets and flying over to Iran and getting ready to do some business with them. And that happened within really days of that deal. So now you're talking about the solidification of all of that this many years later and what that looks like. What happens if the United States walks away? I want to know two things, both diplomatically / politically and just realistically in terms of what we can get in a better deal.
Well, I think a number of things will happen. Firstly, I think you're going to see the reimposition of U.S. sanctions against Iran. That is a good thing. You have to hold this brutal, barbaric regime to account. I think, secondly, many leaders in Europe are already betting that the United States is actually going to walk away from the deal. So I don't think you're going to see huge shock and horror expressed in Europe over a U.S. withdrawal, because I think most European leaders have accepted that the US is highly likely to walk away from the deal. So you're not going to see, I think, some big disruption to the transatlantic alliance. But thirdly, and this is very important, the United States will lead an effort to get a new deal with Iran, holding the Iranian regime to account, ensuring that Iran does not acquire nuclear weapons. At the same time, I think the United States will aggressively confront Iran's support for international terrorism.
You heard
yes.
Real quickly, you heard the threats going back and forth. I mean, the Iran foreign minister saying that this hurts our credibility, and leadership in Iran saying what they will do in retaliation, and then our own president saying that if they threaten the United States, they'll see a response like few other countries have ever seen before. Your last quick word.
Well, the Iranian regime is playing with fire. They're not dealing here with the weak-kneed Obama administration. The Trump presidency is very tough on Iran with very good reason. And the number one goal for the United States must be to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear weapons power. The Iran nuclear agreement, unfortunately, does not guarantee that. And so the United States must lead on the world stage and rally the free world to confront what is an extremely dangerous and brutal regime.
Niall Gardner, the Heritage Foundation, important times. Thank you. And thank you for that dollar figure of $5 billion between the trade, Germany and Iran. That sets us up. Thank you very much, because we are waiting that joint news conference between President Trump and Chancellor Merkel, a historic meeting now between the leaders of North and South Korea, as we have been talking about this hour already, ahead of President Trump's planned summit with Kim Jong-un. Whether the president should get credit for kickstarting peace talks on the Korean Peninsula. A lot to cover this hour. Stay with us. We're awaiting that joint news conference with President Trump and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The president greeted the chancellor earlier today at the White House. You watched that with us as it was happening. The Iran nuclear deal and trade atop their discussions. But we'll learn more when we bring you their remarks about 30 minutes from now. And this Fox News alert, the leaders of North and South Korea have made history. They met this morning ahead of President Trump's planned visit with Kim Jong-un. They announced they would work toward a peace agreement, a permanent peace treaty, and the elimination of nuclear weapons from the peninsula. President Trump praised the summit. Watch.
I want to express my hope that all of the people of Korea, North Korea and South, can someday live in harmony, prosperity, and peace. And it looks like it could happen. I'll be meeting with Kim Jong-un in the coming weeks.
Greg Palcott, live from Seoul, South Korea. Greg.
Hi, Harris. Yes, no more war. That was one of the headlines coming out of Friday's summit, which frankly was a little light on detail, but very strong on message. Kim Jong-un becoming the first North Korean leader since the Korean War to step foot in South Korea, crossing over the DMZ to greet his host, the South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Throughout a carefully choreographed day, the 33-year-old North Korean leader, according to experts we spoke to and our own observations, handled himself pretty well. Remember, this is the first time that he has been on the international live stage. At the end of several long sessions, the two leaders ended up calling for a complete denuclearization. Still, there was no real time frame for this or other specifics. Likewise, there was that dramatic call for a peace treaty to formally end the Korean War. But as we've seen in the past, that could involve a lot of haggling. Still, the experts that we have been speaking to here say this is all a very good warm-up for the Trump-Kim meeting, not spelling out the details, but stating the goals, allowing perhaps U.S. negotiators, President Trump, to cut to the chase. And likewise, the White House, like we, no doubt, got a good sense of what this guy is about. I asked one of the experts, is Kim Jong-un somebody that Donald Trump could do business with? I was told yes, maybe Harris, with a big caveat, a buyer beware. North Korea has tried to sell the United States and the West on this stuff a couple times in the past.
I don't know if you caught it somewhat with a delay, I would imagine, from where you are. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina said, yeah, we can't trust these people. We have to get their definitions of things. And so we'll work to cover the facts as they happen on that. Greg Palcott, thank you. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, is giving credit to her boss for setting the wheels in motion for this potential breakthrough on the Korean Peninsula. Watch.
This president created the climate that allows for this. Obviously, North and South Korea had not met in this fashion in a very long time. The people there have suffered for many, many years. And it's this president who wishes to achieve what so many other presidents have either attempted or, in fact, promised and not been able to deliver upon.
Let's bring in South Carolina Republican Congressman Joe Wilson. He's Assistant Majority Whip and is one of only 2 members of Congress who has been to North Korea. Great to see you today.
Well, Harris, great to be with you.
First of all, you've been there. You've stepped down on that soil. And what you saw today was a different step on that Korean Peninsula. Your thoughts?
It's very historic. By having Kim Jong-un and President Moon actually cross the border. I was there in August, and the thought of crossing the border was inconceivable just in August. And then, as you indicated, I have actually been to Pyongyang. I've seen the destitution of North Korea. I've also obviously visited many cities in South Korea, one of the wealthiest and most progressive and positive countries on earth. And so this is a huge tribute to President Trump and his team. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has done such a great job. Ambassador Nikki Haley in New York has made a difference. And the National Security Advisor John Bolton. The president has a team in place to make a difference to provide for denuclearization and peace through strength.
All right, I want to bring in some words now from the President of the United States. I'm going to put those up on the screen and read them. Let's watch.
I don't think he's playing. No, I don't think he's playing. And you know, it's never gone like this. It's never gone this far. I don't think it's ever had this enthusiasm for them wanting to make a deal. And yeah, I agree. The United States has been played beautifully like a fiddle because you had a different kind of a leader. We're not going to be played.
No need to read them. We could hear the president himself. You talk about the tone and tenor of what's going on in this, really what will turn out to be eventually a negotiation, right?
Yes, it will. And hey, it is different. President Trump is totally different from the prior presidents. He's making a difference. He understands that you must be strong, and that's what he's doing, building up our military. Camp Humphreys, by providing for the missile defense systems, by working with President Xi of China, by Prime Minister Abe of Japan, with President Moon in Seoul. He's really made it's so different. And people need to also look, Harris, at the agreement that was signed between the two Koreas today. Very historic agreement, which leads, I believe, to denuclearization, and President Trump deserves credit.
I want to step in there because also of your home state, South Carolina. I had on Senator Tim Scott a few minutes ago, and he said, we need to get the definition. We need to check their Websters against ours, if you will, on denuclearization. He says that they can't be trusted, but we have to speak the same language. Are we speaking the same language?
Well, and that's why we have Donald Trump, and we have people who are not naive. And we have people who actually will provide for a verification, not like the Iran deal. I mean, that was ridiculous and puts American families at risk. But we have a president now who it will be real verification, and I know led by Senator Tim Scott.
All right, I want to show something, and I'm hoping you can see it. Otherwise, maybe you haven't. I can describe it. The White House has released a picture of newly confirmed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Kim Jong-un during Pompeo's secret trip to North Korea over the Easter weekend. You know, you talk about advancing forward. What is the end game here for North Korea? Do they really want peace? They signed a little agreement today, you say. Do they really want peace, or is it something else that they're looking for?
Well, because we have a president who is serious, by sanctions, remember they stopped the ships with oil coming into North Korea. Over and over again, we've cut off banking to North Korea. We've had Donald Trump has made such a positive impact. He's real. Sadly, we've had presidents who simply offered aid almost by like a ransom. But today, we have a strong president. Peace through strength.
I'm writing that down. Offered aid almost like a ransom. Why do you put it that way?
Because it was horrible that we were providing billions of dollars to a totalitarian, despotic regime under the hope that they would change. They did not change.
Yeah. Okay. Representative Wilson, thank you very much. We'll bring you back.
It's a historic day around the world.
Well, you're one of only two in Congress to have seen it. We appreciate your perspective today.
Thank you. Thank you.
President Trump is set to speak to reporters a short time from now. We are awaiting a joint news conference with the president and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. We'll bring you there live as it happens. And the president is now slamming James Comey after the former FBI director denied that the release of his memos was actually a leak. He says it was not. This amid growing questions over whether those memos contained classified material. We'll talk with a top House lawmaker. Stay close.
You said in the memos, I said I don't do sneaky things, I don't leak, I don't do weasel moves. But, I mean, we can argue what a leak is, but that's a leak, isn't it?
It's not.
Ahead of the midterm elections for him politically. Or should the commander-in-chief try to make peace with the media? RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany is with me next. And again, we are watching inside the White House for that joint news conference with President Trump and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. We were learning a lot this hour from Tim Scott, Senator of South Carolina, about the billions of dollars that get traded between Iran and Germany and why Iran deal is probably hot topic for those two right now. We'll take you there live. President Trump's joint press conference with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. We're also following President Trump's decision to ditch the White House Correspondents Association dinner this Saturday for the second year in a row. Instead, he plans to head to Michigan to hold a campaign-style rally with some 10,000 supporters. The president says in a campaign fundraising email, I'd rather not be stuck in a room with, quote, fake news liberals. So is this a good move? RNC spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany joins me now. She's already laughing because he is very, very blunt. Talk to me about the politics, though, of attending the dinner versus not.
Well, first, when President Trump doesn't attend the dinner, they lose corporate sponsors. Hollywood celebrities decide not to show up. We saw that happen last year. And I think it's a good decision on the part of the president. You know, look, I went to this White House Correspondents' Dinner last year. I found many of the jokes, the anti-Trump jokes, to be mean-spirited, to be angry, to be rude. And while these jokes were being told, I found it really interesting that a member of the White House Correspondents Association, a member of the White House Press Corps, someone who is known for her notoriously very hostile questions to Sarah Sanders, was standing up, jumping up and down, giving standing ovations during these jokes. And it was quite ironic that same night that Bob Woodward said, a journalist should not have a political dog in this fight. A journalist should try to get the best obtainable version of the truth. But many of those journalists had their political animus on display.
You know, we see, quite frankly, this president responding on a daily basis, not waiting for some dinner once a year. We just saw him call a question stupid at another photo op during the visit with French President Macron earlier this week. He is very blunt with the press. As you head into midterm elections, though, how does that hinder or help? Maybe it speaks to his base, but what does that do for what you're trying to do in terms of get people elected?
Well, there's no doubt it rallies our base. Our base doesn't trust the media, but not just our base, Harris. We've seen a really interesting trend over the last year where we've seen polling, Monmouth in particular, that says 3/4 of the American people believe mainstream media institutions report fake news. Really interesting poll from Politico that 46% of people literally think the media makes up stories about Trump, and another 17% was undecided. So people are waking up. They realize the hostility, the ferocity of the press, and they're rejecting it. So his pointing it out makes people see the truth.
Yeah, that Political one about 46% of people thinking that things are made up is particularly troubling because people don't have time to vet what the media are telling them all the time. That's supposed to be our job. Real quickly before I let you go, the president going to Washington, Michigan, where they expect a very large crowd. His message will be what?
His message will be, I'm working for the American people. I'm not, hobnobbing with the elite in D.C. at this fancy dinner. I want to be with you, the American people. I have delivered for you. The economy is better. He's breathed life into this economy, unemployment at historic lows, wages on the rise, North Korea deal potentially in the works. It's an exciting time to be an American, and he's going to deliver the good news to those people.
All right, RNC chairperson Kayleigh McEnany, great to see you on this fine Friday. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. You too.
Okay, so we are awaiting the start of that joint news conference at the White House, and now we can take you there inside the East Room as they wait for the president and German chancellor to step up to a lecture and a piece. As that happens, we'll take you there. Stay close.
And what a week. Now we're waiting for President Trump and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel to hold a joint news conference. We'll bring that to you live, followed by analysis with my pals Ari Fleischer and Chris Starwalt. Stick around for the Daily Briefing.
Fox News alert as we await that joint news conference between the president and Chancellor Merkel of Germany, which is set to start at any moment now. There are big questions about whether the German leader can convince the president to stick with the Iran nuclear accord. This is newly installed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says without substantial changes, remember this broke this hour, without substantial changes, President Trump is unlikely to stay in the Iran nuke deal. Time now for the Power Panel. Kevin McCullough, radio talk show host for Salem Media. Doug Schoen served as a pollster for former President Bill Clinton and is also co-author of America and the Age of Trump. And a Fox News contributor. Great to see you. So we're going to keep an eye to the side for this because this room is filling up. And as soon as that happens live, we'll go to that inside the East Room. Let's talk a little bit about where we are with the president. And I want to jump right into a conversation that our viewers should have heard during the commercial. So you've got an Indiana lawmaker, Messer, Senator Lindsey Graham, calling for potentially the Nobel Peace Prize for President Trump if he gets a deal between the North and South of Korea.
Well, I would say most Americans of all ideological stripes and parties would support that. But, Harris, it's a very big if. We're a long way away from a North Korean deal. But on the other hand, as you were saying, and I think correctly, who would have believed that the president of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, would walk across the demilitarized zone into South Korea? That is a huge, huge step.
Kevin, credit goes where?
Well, I think just remember when Trump came into office, you had North Korea launching missiles. You had them on an aggressive kind of hostile front. Something changed somewhere along the line, and suddenly they became very cooperative. The
What changed?
I'm not sure. I think it was Trump's dual approach. The State Department saying one thing, military saying something else. All of it saying, don't mess with us.
All right. Not to jump too far ahead, we'll get to Iran in just a second, but I want to go back to this Nobel Peace Prize, because we did see President Obama do this very early in his tenure. You talk about something as monumental as possible permanent peace on that peninsula since 1953, the armistice there, versus why did President Obama get the Nobel Peace Prize?
I think it was because of his speech at the University of Cairo extending an olive branch to the Arab nations. Now, sadly, Harris, that didn't work out so well. We've had instability in Syria, instability in Egypt, instability in Libya, and I think the Middle East is a less safe place since the president extended that olive branch to the Arabs.
President
Obama, I'm sorry, and, quote, led from behind, which didn't work out so well either.
Kevin?
Well, I just think most Americans wouldn't even have pinned it to the Cairo speech. They were just scratching their head. Why did he get it? There's nothing absolutely that you can point to. With this, if you pull this off, if Trump pulls this off, this is one of those once-in-a-generation peace agreements.
So is it him pulling this off? I mean, he will sit down potentially.
He gets the last meeting.
Right. That's what I was going to point out. So if the first opening salvo, the first word was today with the Korean leaders shaking hands, potentially then the next round will be our president.
But it hasn't been, because there's been this negotiation that's been ongoing for some time.
We know that from Pompeo, too.
But here's what happens, Harris. Take your viewers inside. A deal will be worked out by underlings before Trump and Kim Jong-un sit down, because the last thing anybody wants is the American president or the North Korean president walking out on the other.
You know what's funny about that? We've heard so many Democrats, Doug, go after this president for not having staffing in certain places, although they block him. But they say, you know, at the State Department, we like Mike Pompeo because he's going to hire some people. He still has to do the job. He's at NATO today.
Well, and with all of that done, we still got our CIA director on North Korean soil over Easter weekend. That underling process that Doug was just talking about, it's probably already underway.
I'm sure it is, yes.
All right, let's talk Iran.
Sure.
The president now, you heard Mike Pompeo, new Secretary of State, saying to those people at NATO, and I'm sure they dropped their coffee and tea when they heard it, if you don't substantially change something in that Iran nuke deal, the president is not going to recertify on May 12th. What happens?
Well, we don't know what will happen. A big if is whether the Iranians re-engage with their nuclear program. Now, you know,
but a new deal, a change would have to happen.
And it is unclear to me whether the Germans will go along. A question about the French and the...
Why wouldn't they? Outside of that $5 billion that they're trading with Iran right now.
Because they have economic ties, because they have ties to Hezbollah that are candidly not what we think is tolerable. We have different views and a different approach. And as you point out correctly, there are economic reasons why.
We got to scoot. Thank you, gentlemen.
Great,
we'll
thank
be right
you.
back.